Oh, it's working. Hi, this is Dr. Jason Munsell. It is Saturday, February the 13th, day before Valentine's Day. I'm back in my office because I am going to the Scholars Day sort of luncheon thing to try to talk to some potentially, hopefully, future students and their parents, etc. And so I'm going to be super quick about this. And I created a little PowerPoint for Chapter 4 that's also up, and I know you can't see this very well, so I apologize. So you can do it however you want to do it. Sort of look through the PowerPoint, listen to this, or watch this, then go to the PowerPoint, whatever, and hopefully it's somewhat helpful. But a little preface: this chapter's on fire because there's and I found a cool fire PowerPoint template. And one thing that's really interesting when they're going through all these various case studies, they are obviously trying to be as objective as possible, but at the same time, obviously they're not. Well, they are, but I mean, they are as well critiquing and analyzing these case studies, and so they are framing your interpretation in a way when you do you make the call and answer the questions, because they basically already tell you what they think about what was ineffective or what was effective or whatever. But I don't want to, obviously, through this PowerPoint, give your answers for you. I really want you to truly think about, everything, and what you really ought to do, and I was going to do this for you, but I decided not to, is, and I've mentioned this before, but you might want to read more about the information or about the context and everything like that. I mean, you can easily Google some stuff or do some more extensive research to try to find more information about the case study that you decide to pick. For instance, on this PowerPoint, I do offer you the homepage for Greenburg, Kansas, which I think is really, really cool. It showcases some of the things that our authors talk about. And one of the things that I also sort of think that's really interesting, one of the things I try to do in this little PowerPoint, is go sort of paragraph by paragraph, sort of. That's the way I tend to read stuff, paragraph by paragraph. What's the point of this first paragraph? What's the point of the second paragraph? And then I make little notes by each of the paragraphs to sort of try to capture what's going on in that particular paragraph, and then I can go back and sort of refer to that when I reread things. But in any case, that's sort of what I'm going to try to do. So that's the little preface. BP, big poo. Yeah. Again, there's a lot of stuff that they do, and obviously they say in no uncertain terms that, or at least, well, I don't know. I guess they imply, but I'll let you read it. But so paragraph 1, they hint at the timing and how long it took them to sort of deal with it, and then they talk about how complex everything was, and you might want to notice that they do talk about how BP was the responsible party, but then pretty much other people did all the crisis communication. In paragraph 3 here, which this is this very first one starts on page whatever the page is, the very 60, and it goes to Pyle. Gomer Pyle.
Golly.
But in any case, he is the one that interviewed several of the PIOs, and by the way, a PIO is a public information officer, a very important term for you to know. But there's a discussion of the PIOs working with the ICS, though they never define ICS, but that means a incident command system. So they talk about engaging with the stakeholders, and this, as I think, on paragraph number 5 here, pretty interesting. Their primary stakeholders for the PIOs was the media. Media. That's all they, at least that's the way the authors are talking about it. They didn't talk about no birds or whatever, but media. And then it goes back to paragraph 6 about the framing of it. It talks about the SMEs, the subject matter experts, and the PIOs had wished they'd been more proactive about certain things because there was all this. So they're setting you up as a reader to sort of say, something went wrong here. So after you make the call, they talk about how folks got tired and blah, blah, blah. It was the largest response and recovery operation to an environmental disaster in U.S. history because it was the biggest spill. The PIOs who responded to the crisis experienced high demands for information, often hostile, demanding communication context. They were exhausted and expressed that future PIOs should monitor their rest and stress levels when engaging in crisis communication over an extended period of time. So, again, they're sort of setting you up as reader when you're going to make the call to sort of say, something didn't go right here. Okay. Liar, liar, plant on fire. But he was not a liar. They love Aaron Feuerstein, or Feuerstein, however they say it, at Malden Mills. And you can tell when they love folks. And they love this guy. And he's a lovable guy. Look at him. He's so cute. He buys milk. And so the first little paragraph there is about the nature of the company. And you can tell that they already really like the company. At the time of the fire, the company was privately owned by Aaron Feuerstein and had previously been owned by his father and his grandfather before that. The organization had been in the family for 100 years, had remained steadfast in its community, paid some of the highest wages in the industry, providing much of the economic base, etc., etc., etc. So it's also setting you up to understand what they, as authors, think are good business practices. And then they have another section. This is, they didn't have separate sections in the BP example, but they do have separate sections here in the Malden Mills example or case study. And so they have, there's 3 paragraphs here under the section Crisis Preparation and Planning. And it really talks about Feuerstein's or Feuerstein's, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, his values, and describe his leadership values as sensitivity to the human equation. Woo! And fair and compassionate, pay people their fair amount of money, give them a good benefits to take care of their families, they will produce for you. So all these things about all the various values. And you can tell from all this type of stuff that they really, really like this guy. One owner of a local company explained Feuerstein's character by saying, that's the kind of guy Aaron is. If he's got half a loaf of bread, he's going to share it around. Seems like a really good guy. Talks about all this stuff. When a local synagogue caught fire, he and his brother stepped forward and contributed $2 million to rebuilding. So we had established, strong relationships in the community. So again, they're sort of setting you up to see this in a particular way when you make the call. Then there's a separate section on courageous communication in the wake of disaster and all the various things that he did. And basically you can the 3 paragraphs in that always go back to the human equation. He was concerned with the people more than the profit. Of course, profit is important, but in any case, so there's lots of different things. And then after you make the call, they again showcase how much they really liked him, and he loved his employees and the community, gave them hope and faith, and again, they really like Aaron, and so again, they're sort of setting you up to see this as an effective response to a crisis. The next case study, The Juice is Loose. The long-term complexities in the tainted Odwalla, is that how you say that? I have no idea. Applesauce. Apple juice crisis. One thing that's really interesting here, this is the first one, it sets up the context, and then they did say, or the authors are implying, or well, they come out and say it, that they did a pretty good job. They made substantial changes, blah, 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 and a lot of people lauded them for being effectively dealing with this particular crisis. But it gets complicated. So there's a separate section that's just one paragraph on challenges for multiple stakeholders, and it talked about what happened with the E. coli and how they created a new pasteurization technique. But at the same time, there was a lot of financial hardships for people, for their employees. And so they were all about the customers. Customers. But again, the complexity is maybe not so much their employees, but they did create flash pasteurization. And then there's a longer paragraph or section regarding, well, that was the Ottawa's response, crisis response. So they have that separate section that has 2 paragraphs about what happened and the one lone death. And within 2 months of the crisis, they announced a revolutionary change in production. And Ottawa has not experienced another major recall since this flash pasteurization changed things in 1996. But the more interesting stuff, the larger sort of section, is impact on stakeholders, that has 5 paragraphs. So good that they recovered, but at a price, in a sense. So, like they talk about, Safeway was no longer willing to accept juice from others unless they also did the flash pasteurization. Some of the investors were hurt. Sorry, investors. So consumers were compensated as a result of the crisis, but little was done to support the employees during the crisis. So basically, they're setting this up to saying this is sort of maybe an in-between response. A little bit country, a little bit rock and roll, a little bit good, a little bit bad, a little bit effective, a little bit not so effective, ineffective. So, I mean, the last thing, the response was not without cost to at least 3 sets of stakeholders: small operators, not smooth operators. Smooth operator. You know what? They never mind. I have this joke about like smoothie places, and I have always thinking of Sade, smoothie operator. But in any case, small operators, the other folks in other companies, that investors and the employees sort of were screwed a little bit. But okay, so the next thing, Oklahoma City, and as I say here, I have that terrible, heart-wrenching image that became sort of the image of the Oklahoma City bombing, and it does hit sort of close to home. I'm from Oklahoma, and I was actually a grad student in Arkansas at the time, and I know my dad had a student who they lost somebody. I can't remember, it's so long ago now, but at the time, I know some of you probably remember, maybe some of you don't, but this was the largest terrorist attack in the United States, and it was homegrown. This was obviously before 9/11, sort of eclipsed Oklahoma City, obviously. But it's some really interesting stuff here. The first part is just about the context and how many people died, 168, a lot of them, several children. But then they move on to, which I think this is really interesting. Paragraph 2 is all about Governor Keating, and how he was widely praised for effectively handling this crisis. This is all about Keating. This section is a love fest, Valentine's weekend love fest of Keating. They love Keating, Keating. Woo, woo, woo. And so Keating describes what happened, and then they have these, lessons from Keating in paragraph 3. Train and equip your first responders, search for ways to support teams before, blah, blah, blah. I'll let you read that. Paragraph 4 is all about teamwork. Yay, go team. And one thing I've noticed, in this particular section, it's more quotes from Q